The wind in the high desert town of Mercy's End didn't whisper, it carried accusations. They rode on the dry gusts that swept down from the red mesa, slipping under doors and through window cracks. The words were always the same. Witch. They said it about the woman who lived alone at the edge of the scrubland, in the small cabin shadowed by the old limestone cliffs. Her name was Lena. She kept to herself, which in a small town was the first crime. She grew herbs in a neat, defiant little garden behind her home, sage, yarrow, lavender, and things folks didn't recognize. She sometimes helped with a birthing cow or a colicky horse when the vet from the county seat was too far away, and when the animal got better, people would nod grimly and say it was unnatural. When Old Man Harris's prize bull died suddenly the week after Lena had refused to sell him a parcel of her land, the nodding turned into muttering, and the muttering into a solid, unshakable belief. Sam had seen her only a handful of times in the 2 years since he started driving cattle past Mercy's End on the long trail north. He was a man of the saddle and the sky, his world defined by the movement of herds and the turn of seasons. Town gossip was a nuisance, like flies on a hot day. He paid it little mind. But even he had heard the stories. He'd been in the saloon, the Dusty Spur, last fall when some of the men, fueled by whiskey and fear, talked about running her out. Sam had put down his glass with a thud that silenced the table. "Ain't no business of mine," he'd said, his voice low. "And ain't no business of yours, if she's harming none." The talk had died down, but the looks hadn't. This trip was different. A late spring blizzard in the high passes had thrown the drives into chaos. Sam, with a small herd of strays he'd rounded up for a bounty, found himself ahead of the main drive and needing to hole up near Mercy's End for a week to let the trail ahead clear. He set up a basic camp in a box canyon a mile from town, but on his third evening, trouble found him. His best horse, a steady bay gelding named Brick, had stepped in a prairie dog hole, snapping its leg with a sound that turned Sam's stomach. There was nothing to be done but the merciful thing. After, with a hollow feeling in his chest, Sam knew he needed a new mount, and the only place to get one was Mercy's End. He rode his spare horse into town at dawn, the air still cold. He felt the eyes on him before he reached the stable. He ignored them, haggled briefly with the stable owner, a nervous man named Bert, and bought a raw-boned gray that had spirit. As he was settling the deal, he heard the commotion. It was a sound he hated, the low, gathering rumble of a crowd fueled by bad intention. In the dusty main street, a semicircle of people had formed. At their center was Lena. They had pulled her from her cabin. A basket of freshly picked herbs lay spilled at her feet, the green a violent contrast against the brown earth. A man named Clyde, Old Man Harris's nephew, was the ringleader. He was a bully with soft hands, who fancied himself important. "That's my uncle's land you're squatting on," Clyde shouted, though everyone knew it wasn't true. The paper deed was in Lena's chest at home. "You poisoned his bull with your witchery, and now you're blighting the whole town." Lena stood straight. She was not tall, but her stillness was like a deep root. She wore a simple faded dress, and her dark hair was pulled back in a tight braid. Her face was, "They will come to see it as a trick," she said. "Clyde is a fool, but he is a greedy fool. He wants my land. He will look for proof." "Then we'll have to give them proof," Sam said, the idea forming as he spoke. "At least for a while. Until I can get my herd and move on. Then you can say, 'I don't know. That I ran off. Or died. Something.'" Lena stopped walking. She turned those clear green eyes on him, truly looking at him for the first time. She studied his face, the honest weariness, the lines around his eyes from squinting at sun-drenched plains, the lack of guile. "You would do that? Lie for a witch?" "I don't believe in witches," Sam said simply. "I believe in folks being left alone." A faint, almost invisible smile touched the corner of her mouth. It vanished like a mirage. "My cabin is small. There is only one room. I have my bedroll. I'll sleep in the lean-to. Or outside. I don't mind." She considered this, then gave a single, short nod. "1 week, you said? 1 week. Then the trail will be clear, and I'll be gone. They resumed walking. As her small cabin came into view, nestled against the protective rock face, Sam felt the immense weight of his impulsive promise. He had just tied his fate, however temporarily, to a woman the town wanted gone. He had called her his wife. Now, he had to figure out how to pretend he meant it, with every suspicious eye in Mercy's End watching their every move. The real danger, he realized, might not be the mob in the street, but the unpredictable life he had just walked into inside that quiet cabin at the edge of the wild. The cabin was smaller inside than it looked from the path. Sam stood just over the threshold, his hat in his hands, feeling like a mountain stuffed into a dollhouse. The air smelled of dried herbs, wood smoke, and something clean like pine. Sunlight fell in narrow shafts through a single window, illuminating a world of quiet order. A neatly made bed was in one corner, a rough-hewn table and 2 chairs by the hearth, and shelves lined with jars, books, and bundles of plants. There were no decorations, only function. It was the home of someone who lived entirely within their own mind. Lena moved past him, her movements efficient. She hung her shawl on a peg, knelt to rebuild the fire from the embers in the grate, and filled a kettle from a water bucket without a word. The silence wasn't hostile, but it was thick. Sam felt his own presence as a loud, clumsy thing. "Ma'am," he began, then stopped. "Lena, I reckon I should apologize for the presumption. Naming you my wife like that." She placed the kettle on the hook over the now crackling fire, and finally turned to look at him. "You saved me from a beating, or worse. An apology is not required. A plan, however, is." Her directness was bracing. "Right," Sam said, nodding. "The plan is we act." Mercy's End watched. Curtains twitched. Men on the boardwalk stopped their talk. The air hummed with unasked questions. Sam felt their eyes like physical pressure. He placed a hand on the small of Lena's back, a gesture both protective and possessive, guiding her up the steps to Miller's Mercantile. The touch was for the audience, but he felt her spine stiffen for a moment before she relaxed into the performance. Inside, the store fell silent. Old Man Miller peered at them over his spectacles, his expression caught between curiosity and fear. "Morning," Sam said, his voice louder than necessary. "The wife needs some flour, and salt, and a pound of coffee." Miller blinked. "Wife?" "Yes," Lena said, her voice clear and calm. She placed her own small list on the counter. "And some sewing thread, please. This color." She pointed to a spool. Her ordinary request seemed to disarm the old man more than anything Sam could have said. As Miller fumbled for the items, the bell on the door jingled. Clyde walked in, 2 of his friends flanking him like poorly trained dogs. The store felt suddenly cramped. "Well, look here," Clyde drawled, his eyes sliding from Sam to Lena and back. "The happy couple. Mighty sudden news, ain't it?" "Not sudden if you're the ones gettin' married," Sam said, not turning from the counter. He kept his body angled slightly, placing himself between Clyde and Lena. "Funny, I asked over at Silver Creek," Clyde said, a nasty smile on his face. "The preacher there don't recall a wedding last fall." "Don't recall you at all, Sam." A cold knot formed in Sam's gut. He hadn't expected Clyde to move so fast. He felt Lena go still beside him. Sam turned slowly. He allowed himself a small, dismissive shrug. "We didn't use the Silver Creek preacher. Used the justice of the peace in the next county over. Elk Ridge. Man named Peters. You're welcome to ride all the way over there and ask him." He said it with a flat certainty, praying Clyde was too lazy to make the 3-day ride. It was a gamble, a bluff into a stiff wind. Clyde's smile faltered. He hadn't expected a specific name. He looked at Lena, searching for a crack in her composure. She met his gaze evenly, then turned back to Miller as if bored by the conversation. "Will that be all, Mr. Miller?" Flustered, Miller tallied the bill. Sam paid, took the sack in one hand, and again placed his other hand on Lena's back. We'll be on our way, he said to no one in particular. They walked past Clyde, who stood fuming but silent. Outside, the sun felt blisteringly hot. They didn't speak until they were clear of the last building. Sam let out a long, slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Elk Ridge? Lena asked quietly. Knew a fella from there once, Sam muttered. Hope the justice of the peace is still named Peters. It was quick thinking, she said. It was high praise from her. Then she added, he is not finished. He wants my land. He will find another way. Sam hefted the sack of supplies. The weight felt good, real. Let him try, he said, and the words surprised him with their ferocity. When they finally walked back to her cabin in the deep blue twilight, Lena was silent, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Sam finally spoke. You saved his life. Or his leg, at least. He will be a cripple, she said, her voice heavy. But he will be alive. Martha will manage. She is stronger than she looks. They were afraid of you, Sam said. Martha was, at first. I know, Lena replied. But fear of a neighbor is less than fear of losing your husband. Necessity outweighs superstition. For now. The next day, the gift appeared. A woven basket, left on Lena's porch at dawn. Inside were 6 brown eggs, a jar of wild honey, and a loaf of fresh bread. There was no note. Lena brought it inside, her fingers tracing the handle of the basket. She said nothing, but her eyes were bright. The following evening, as Sam returned from checking on the gray horse in the makeshift corral he'd built, he saw 2 figures approaching the cabin. It was Martha Kearney and Old Man Miller's wife, Susan. They carried a pie dish covered with a cloth. Their steps were hesitant, but they came. Lena met them at the door. There was a stiff, quiet exchange. Sam hung back, tending to the woodpile. He heard Susan Miller say, "For your kindness, Joe is resting easier." And Martha added, "The tea helps." "Thank you." They did not stay long. But they had come. The wall of fear had developed a crack, and through it had come eggs, honey, bread, and a peach pie. That night, Sam could feel a change in the air of the cabin. It was not just the lingering scent of baked fruit. It was a slight softening in Lena's quiet movements, a thoughtful look in her eye as she served him a slice of the pie on a chipped plate. "It's good," he said. "Yes," she agreed. She sat across from him, not eating, just watching the fire. "They are good people. They are just scared." "The world is a scary place," Sam offered. "Easier to blame a mystery than face the hard truth of a broken wagon or a sick animal." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "You are not what I expected, Sam." "Neither are you," he replied, holding her gaze. "I expected a victim. You're a fortress." For the first time, a real, full smile broke across her face. It transformed her, lighting her up from within, and Sam felt something lurch in his chest, like a horse missing a step. He quickly looked down at his pie. The fragile piece shattered 2 days later. Sam was in town, buying bullets, when he saw the stranger. The man rode a fine dappled horse and wore a tailored suit under his trail coat, a city man softened by travel. He was talking intently with Clyde outside the sheriff's office. Clyde was nodding, pointing eagerly in the direction of Lena's cabin. Sam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. He made his way back quickly, the bullets heavy in his pocket. Lena was in the garden. He didn't mince words. "There's a stranger in town." Talking to Clyde. Looked official. Lawyer, maybe. Or a land agent. All the softness left. "It was all I could think of," Sam admitted, running a hand through his hair. "He backed down, didn't he?" "For now," she said. She turned to face him. In her green eyes, he saw a storm of emotions, gratitude, fear, and a dawning, terrifying realization. "Sam, you cannot. You have already risked too much. When the judge comes." "When the judge comes," Sam said, the decision crystallizing as he spoke the words, "we will be husband and wife. In every way that matters to the law. She stared at him, uncomprehending. I'm not leaving, Lena, he said, the truth of it settling into his bones. The pretense was over. For him, at least. That man, Clyde, that lawyer, they won't stop. The only way to protect your home is to make it my home. For real. The word real hung in the air between them, vast and fragile. He was no longer talking about protecting a stranger. He was talking about building a life. The cowboy who lived by the sky was putting down a root, in the most unlikely soil imaginable, for the woman they once called a witch. The month that followed was a time of suspended breath. The land itself seemed to hold still under the baking summer sun, waiting for the storm of the judge's arrival. Inside the small cabin, a different kind of quiet unfolded. Sam's declaration had not been met with words, but with a profound, watchful stillness from Lena. She did not accept, nor did she refuse. She simply continued, but everything had changed. The pretense was gone. Sam no longer slept on the floor by the hearth. One evening, after a day of helping the Kearneys rebuild their wagon, Lena had wordlessly folded the extra blanket and placed it at the foot of her own bed. It was an invitation, not to intimacy, but to shared space. To partnership. That first night, they lay side by side in the dark, two rigid lines under the single quilt, as distant as stars. But night by night, the space between them lessened. It was the unconscious gravitation of warmth, of shared breath in the silent dark. One morning, Sam woke to find her head on his shoulder, her braids soft against his cheek. He did not move until the sun was high. The work continued, but it was no longer a performance. Sam repaired the roof. He built a proper corral for the horse and talked of buying a milk cow come spring. He rode out with Joe Kearney's eldest boy to show him the best grazing patches, the hidden springs. He became, without fanfare, a part of the landscape. Lena taught him about her garden, the purpose of each plant, the comfrey for poultices, the chamomile for rest, the sharp, cleansing rosemary. He learned to grind the leaves and roots with her mortar and pestle, his large hands surprisingly careful. In turn, he told her of the long trails, the northern lights over Montana, the taste of dust from a 1,000-head stampede. He spoke of a loneliness so vast it was part of the scenery. She listened, her hands never idle, mending his shirts that were perpetually torn on wire and thorn. Clyde did not show his face, but his malice found other ways. One morning, they found the garden partly trampled, delicate plants crushed under what looked like boot heels. Sam spent the afternoon carefully Judge Bennett picked it up. He looked at it. He looked at Sam. He looked at Lena. He held the paper up to the light from the window, his face unreadable. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, with a slight, almost weary sigh, Judge Bennett set the paper down. This land, he said, his voice gravelly and final, is clearly deeded to the estate of Captain William Reed, and by inheritance to his daughter, Lena Reed. He fixed Finch with a withering stare. The document you present is a clumsy forgery. The dates are in the wrong ink. He then picked up the marriage certificate again. As for the marital status. He paused, and Sam felt the world drop away. The judge's eyes swept over them. Sam, standing protectively close to Lena, Lena's unwavering posture, the way her hand had instinctively sought the edge of Sam's sleeve. He saw the way the people in the room looked at them, not with the scorn reserved for outcasts, but with the guarded respect given to a couple who had endured. Marriage, Judge Bennett said, his tone shifting from legal to something almost philosophical, is not merely a paper. It is a covenant before community. It is evidenced by shared toil, shared hearth, and shared defense. He glanced at the concerned faces of Martha Kearney and Eli the blacksmith. It appears to this court that a covenant exists here. The document is in order. The case is dismissed. Mr. Harris, any further nuisance from you regarding this land will be considered contempt. A collective exhale filled the room. Clyde's face was purple with rage. Finch was already packing his papers, his expression sour. The judge banged his gavel. Outside, in the blinding sunlight, the crowd spilled into the street. People murmured, some nodding at Sam and Lena with approval, others dispersing in disappointment. But the threat was over. They were free. They walked home without speaking, the weight of the performance finally, completely, lifted. Only when the cabin door closed behind them, shutting out the world, did the enormity of it all crash down. Lena leaned back against the door, her strength spent. Sam stood before her, his hat in his hands. "We're safe," he whispered. She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw not just relief, but a searching, a question. "You stayed," she said. "I told you I would. But why?" The question hung between them, the last secret. "You could have had your freedom. You have it now. The judge believed you. The land is safe. You owe me nothing." Sam took a step closer. He reached out and gently touched a strand of hair that had escaped her braid, tucking it behind her ear. His calloused fingers brushed her cheek. "Lena," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "That first day, I said I didn't believe in witches. I believe in folks being left alone. But I was wrong." He took a deep breath. "I do believe in magic. I believe in the magic of a quiet garden in the desert. I believe in the magic of a strong woman who isn't afraid of the dark. I believe in the magic of a home." He cupped her face in his hands. "The only trick, the only magic I care about, is how you turned a lonely cowboy into a man with a place to belong. You're not my wife because a piece of paper or a judge says so. You're my wife because my heart says so. If you'll have me. For real." Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling, a real, radiant, unguarded smile that lit the whole room. She placed her hands over his. "Sam Carter," she whispered. "The only magic is that a man like you could look at a woman like me and see a future. My answer is yes. For real." He kissed her then, not as a performance for a crowd, but as a promise in the quiet of their own home. It was a kiss that held all the words they hadn't said, all the lonely years before, and all the shared years to come. Outside, the wind still swept down from the red mesa. But it no longer carried accusations. It carried the scent of sage from Lena's garden, the sound of Sam chopping wood for the winter, and the quiet, unbreakable peace of a love that had grown, not from a lie, but from the undeniable truth that had blossomed within it. They called her a witch, until a cowboy claimed her as his wife. And in doing so, they both found their way home.